Good morning, folks. Good morning. I am certainly glad I'm here at the Pinnacle Center this morning and that I didn't end up at the DeVos Convention Center by accident, because do you know that the National Rabbit Show is happening right now down at the DeVos Convention Center? And as I was in my hotel, I kept seeing people bring in these little crates, and I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? Well, it's full of rabbits. And in the elevator, the man told me there are 43,000 rabbits at the DeVos Convention Center today. So, oh God, yeah. Did you see it on your way in? God. Anyway, Barbara Nelson Jameson. I'm with the National Park Service Rivers and Trails Program. I'm my planner for the program, and I work on conservation recreation projects throughout the state of Michigan here. And I want to thank the West Michigan Strategic Alliance, Greg and Steve, for inviting me here this morning to be with you. Also Bonnie and Katie from the Green Infrastructure Leadership Council as well. And it's exciting for me to see how this Green Infrastructure Initiative has grown. Can you hear me okay? Has grown, because I was here back in 2003, 2004, working with a number of you. I ran into Rod from the Annis Water Resources Institute, and John Schultz, and Julie Stoneman from the Conservancy, but actually worked with them to help develop the natural connections maps. And so it's great to be back and see kind of the growth and the energy in this room, and that the whole Green Infrastructure Initiative here is moving forward. So, and to hear about all your successes, too. This morning, thank you, I would like to acknowledge the presentation this morning. Some of the information in this presentation was also developed by Jonathan Jaros from the Center for Applied Environmental Research at the University of Michigan, Flint, and also Dr. Mark Benedict. I was asked to talk a little bit about the design of a green infrastructure network, about some of the ecological environmental services and benefits that green infrastructure provides, and to take a look at what's happening in Michigan across the state in regards to green infrastructure projects and initiatives. I would like to recognize Dr. Mark Benedict. He was a friend and colleague of mine. He passed away this year from a battle of cancer. Mark literally wrote the book on green infrastructure. He worked for the Conservation Fund. He also taught the course on green infrastructure, strategic conservation planning at the National Conservation Training Center. That course is still offered twice a year, and I would highly recommend it. But Mark certainly had a passion and a concern and a drive to protect and conserve our environment. So with that, I want to talk about a minute words matter, and Mark and Ed McMahon chose the term green infrastructure for a reason. When we think of infrastructure, obviously we think of our gray infrastructure, our built infrastructure, our road systems, our bridge systems, our power systems, our school systems. And according to Soji, I looked up in the dictionary, according to the Webster's New World Dictionary, infrastructure is defined as a substructure or underlying foundation on which the continuance and growth of a community or a state depends. The term green infrastructure emphasizes those areas, those natural areas and features, conservation lands, working lands with conservation value, are equally important if they're protected and restored to the continuance and to the growth of a community and a state. It emphasizes that conservation is a necessity, it's not an amenity, and it should be planned and conserved as a system, just like we plan and build our road systems. We like to think of green infrastructure as the underlying foundation, that substructure that sustains our natural ecosystem processes upon which we all depend, upon which life depends. Some of those services that our environment or ecological systems provide us include cleaning polluted air and moderating ambient air temperature, filtering and storing fresh water, carrying storm water and reducing flooding, recharging our aquifers and our groundwater, developing our soils and stabilizing our soils, providing habitat for the pollinators that pollinate our cropland, and of course wildlife habitat and species diversity. Now, as our environment continues to be developed, land is being consumed at about a rate of 2 million acres annually per year in this country. As that consumption of land and fragmentation of land continues, it's really imperative for us to look at planning and designing a green infrastructure network or system that can actually link those areas, natural areas and features that still remain. So when we look at a green infrastructure network, and this is very simplified, folks, but we look at a system of hubs and links and sites. And the network design principles come out of the work that's been done on conservation biology and landscape ecology, as well as environmental planning and design and geographic information system analysis and design. And I'm not going to get into the design of green infrastructure networks because I don't have time, but there's lots of good resources out there, especially this book in regards to developing the models in the process to assess your environment to protect green infrastructure. Again, very simplistically, green infrastructure, hubs, links, sites, but those hubs are those natural areas, those natural features that contain an intact ecosystem and a diversity of species. Those hubs may be, national parks, or if you take it down a scale, for instance, on a regional scale, they may be your county parks. But they anchor the network and provide an origin and destination for wildlife and a center for undisturbed ecological processes. You'll see the cores. The cores are the most protected areas within those hubs, and they represent lands and waters that are most valued and are necessary for the long-term integrity of the functioning ecosystem. And importantly then are the links that tie the system together and enable the green infrastructure network to work. The links or corridors really should be in sufficient size and space to serve as biological conduits for plant and animal species and allow the movement of plants and animals between the protected or conserved hubs. Now, if we are able to conserve, manage, and sustain our green infrastructure, we will also be supporting native plants and animal species, maintaining ecological processes and functions, increasing nature's ability to respond to change, floods and fire, especially important really in the intensity of flood and fire season last 10 years, sustain our air and water resources, and help protect and restore naturally functional ecosystems. Soji had some statistics about the economic benefits of maintaining green infrastructure. I think this example is probably one of the best, or one of the best examples. And this is New York City watershed. The cost to purchase the Sterling Forest watershed lands was about $1.5 billion. The Sterling Forest watershed lands, those lands actually, well, that's where New York City's drinking water came from, out of that watershed. $1.5 billion to conserve those lands. The cost to build a filtration plant, if the watershed lands had been developed, was $6 billion. It's a savings of $4.5 billion just for conserving and utilizing free services of green infrastructure. Don't forget the social aspects, benefits of green infrastructure, and I think Steve did a nice job talking about those in regards to providing opportunity for recreation and education, enhancing a community's appearance, increasing property values, connecting people to nature. And I mentioned this yesterday, but there's a lot of concern right now about children and their connection to nature, or actually I should say disconnect to nature. And there's a number of books out there, Last Child in the Woods, Nature Deficit Disorder. But the concern is if children do not grow with a value for nature, we lose our constituency in the future that will support our conservation efforts. And right now, for instance, the state of Michigan, the Department of Natural Resources, is very much trying to engage youth in natural resource-related recreation like hunting and fishing. So we'll have a constituency to support our natural resources and our natural lands in the future. And also, as Steve so nicely talked about, contributing to the quality of life and the economic well-being of our communities and our people. I want to take a look at what's happening across the state here in Michigan, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel around the state and work with many of you. I see a number of folks here in the room that I get an opportunity to work with. And from my experience, there are 8 regional green infrastructure initiatives presently in Michigan. Saginaw Bay Greenways in the Saginaw Bay Midland area, the dark blue. WildLink, which is a program that's up in Emmett, Charlevoix, Grand Traverse, and Leelanau counties. The West Michigan Strategic Alliance Initiative right here for the 7 counties, obviously. GreenLinks looks at the Genesee, Lapeer, Shiawassee counties. Oakland County has a green infrastructure plan. Macomb County is following suit. Growing Greener is a new initiative that's down in Cass County, Van Buren, and Berrien County. Thank you. And Mid-Michigan is in Clinton, is in the brown there, is Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham counties. And I'd just like to just share a few things, look a little more closely at a couple of these initiatives. But actually, let's go back here a second. Okay, take a look at where those initiatives are located, right? And they're pretty much right straight across that 94 corridor and then north up towards the Saginaw Bay region. Look at the projected growth for the state of Michigan in 2040. And you can see where green infrastructure initiatives are taking place where there is a great pressure of development and where we're losing our natural spaces. Take a look at that. It's pretty amazing. So I'd like to take a look at a little bit closer at some of the projects, share with you some similarities and possibly some differences. But the Vision of Green for Saginaw Bay takes a look at the Saginaw, Midland, and Saginaw, Midland, and Bay counties. And this is actually an example of what I've seen happen here over the course of a number of years in the state of Michigan, where the initiative starts out as a Trails and Greenways initiative, right? So folks are looking at those recreational corridors and those riparian corridors for recreation and water quality. And in Saginaw, what happened is that area had intensive development. People were concerned about land use. There had been a lot of work done on watershed, obviously the Saginaw Bay watershed, and there was a lot, it had numerous wildlife resources, very rich wildlife resources, state and national wildlife refuges, and the project actually evolved to take more of an ecological, having more ecological goals rather than just the recreational and water quality goals associated with it. We used what we called a scientific and community-based process to develop the green infrastructure vision. We actually merged what the analysis, the modeling, the computer modeling, I think suitability analysis. Rod probably would know more about it than I do. But we actually merged what we call the computer-generated solution with the community-based solution, very similar to what we did here for Natural Connections, where we invited folks like yourself, you probably participated, many of you, into the room and asked you to identify what is your vision for a green infrastructure network here. And they provided their knowledge and their values, and the map in the middle is what the community designed for Saginaw County. And you can see how closely related they are, very similar in nature, except people actually wanted to include more in that green infrastructure network than the computer did. And what we did then is merge those to get the final green infrastructure vision for Saginaw County. We did green infrastructure network vision for Saginaw County. We looked at it and put it together for the region, Saginaw Bay Midland, but we also took that information down to the township level, municipal level, both the inventory, the assessment, and the GIS maps, so folks could utilize that information of what was significant green infrastructure in their other planning efforts, whether it be land use, transportation, master planning efforts. West Michigan, I just want to say, out of all the initiatives that I'm familiar with, is the only one that I know of that has emerged from a larger regional initiative that is combining, again, the environment with economic prosperity and with the quality of life, and looking at how green infrastructure fits into their growth development plans. It's also the only initiative that I know where they've committed resources to hire a coordinator, a green infrastructure coordinator, to help facilitate the process and move the plan forward. So you're unique in that way, and there's a lot of folks who would like to take some lessons from you. And so WildLink is a project of the Conservation Resource Alliance up in Northwest Michigan, as I had mentioned, that looks specifically at wildlife and wildlife habitats. That program actually emerged out of the Northwest Michigan Greenways Initiative that was done back in, boy, Patty, about 2000 or so. And what it does is it looks at large tracts of public land and looks at significant wildlife corridors that can connect those lands to provide greater habitat for wildlife. And there's another reference I would like to share with you, what's done by Dr. Richard Fisher, that actually took a look at very closely the criteria for designating wildlife corridors. So it has both criteria and recommendations for designation of wildlife corridors up in the northern Michigan area. That can be gotten from the Conservation Resource Alliance. The one thing that's unusual about the WildLink program is that it targets private landowners. Okay, so it designates these significant wildlife corridors, and then it looks at the land ownership within those corridors, and those landowners who have significant land holdings, they actually will contact and, first of all, let them know that their land is valuable for wildlife, and then secondly, talk with them about how to manage their land better for wildlife, improve their land for wildlife, and or if they would consider some permanent sort of land protection and bring in some of the conservancies and the tools that conservancies have for that. Green Links is in the Genesee, Lapeer, Shiawassee County area, and the thing that I'd like to show you here, Green Links and Oakland County were the first two regions that I know of to use the Michigan Natural Features Inventories process that was developed by John Paskus to identify potential conservation areas. And you can see the criteria that they use to identify potential conservation areas: total size of the core area that's being protected, the riparian corridor, the length of that corridor, landscape connectivity, restorability of surrounding lands, the quality of the vegetation, and biorarity score, which is your threatened and endangered species index. The potential conservation areas then were actually prioritized based on that set of criteria. That model, like I said, was used for Genesee, Lapeer, and Shiawassee counties, as well as Oakland County. and is currently being used right hot off the press for Growing Greener, which is in the Cass, Berrien, Van Buren counties. Still not used to saying that. So there's now some, there's some comparability amongst the data sets and the information that's being used, obviously, to design and prioritize green infrastructure in a number of the regions here in Michigan. I was talking with Bonnie yesterday about the possible opportunity. Look at that. Look at that corridor of green infrastructure initiatives. And there has not been a forum upon which all these different initiatives can get together and talk with one another, talk about best practices, share information, talk about hurdles and obstacles, or just move the whole concept of green infrastructure forward here in the state of Michigan. And we talked about maybe the possibility, I'll just throw this out for consideration, but maybe next year the next summit hosted by the West Michigan Strategic Alliance can provide that opportunity for all these different efforts to get together and really try and move green infrastructure on a statewide basis forward. So please consider that. We're not alone, as I just wanted to just briefly show you some of the other projects that are going on around the country. Also, green infrastructure is happening at the state level in some places. Maryland has a green infrastructure plan. Florida has a green infrastructure plan. Massachusetts, Virginia is working on one. And I just want to thank you again for the opportunity for being here this morning and being able to address you. Also, I want to thank you for your passion and your interest in nature and conservation. And just remember that the protection of land is an expression of faith in the future, and it's a pact between generations. So, thank you very much.